Hello and welcome. It is your weekly program that has always been concerned with the virtual gathering. That is the gathering that occurs on air and online. I'm Sherwood McCaskie. As always, thanks for your time. A very warm welcome to our viewers around the world. In last week's program, historian Dr. Henderson Carter presented the overarching view, so to speak, of the parish of St. George. In keeping with the theme we gather in, Dr. Carter focused on the land and discussed the pivotal role St. George played in feeding the people of this parish, hence the term the breadbasket parish of Barbados. This week we have descended Gun Hill and have taken up position on lower ground. Now, if the idea of a town in every parish were a concept in Barbados, as is the case in the northwestern Caribbean island of Jamaica, where every parish has a town, then Charles Rowe Bridge would undoubtedly be the town of St. George. The spotlight now falls on its history. The discussion takes you back as early as the 1940s. Here is Marva Greene.
There wasn't always a gas station there, but as I was growing up, I could remember the gas station came about in the time of a guy named Mr. Lucas. He had opened the gas station down there, and it was small. It wasn't like how it is now. Very small area, and that's how that started there.
Mrs. Elaine was born in the late 1930s. In the late 1950s, she left Barbados to study and work in Canada. Throughout this program, her account of Charles Rowe Bridge and the surrounding areas will take into consideration the 1940s and the 1950s.
You have seen right now a spanking new gas station with all the modern amenities. I remember as a child growing up, that was a big, great house, you would call it in those days. Upstairs, underneath was the shop. Upstairs was the dwelling house. Lovely big chandeliers, so to a little child that would look like a haven. To each of these great houses, there were always attached an orchard. That orchard was outstanding. In fact, I will tell you, there was a big apple tree, and fellas used to go up there and raid that apple tree. But however, there was mammy apples, star apples, every kind of fruit that you could ever find, just where those gas pumps are now. Amazing, isn't it? Now, the people who lived there were called Mr. and Mrs. Manning. And they were attached to this assembly hall right here. He was the pastor of that hall, of that assembly hall. That assembly hall was one roof, gable shape, same shape as it has now, in wood. Today, you can see quite a difference.
When you go down the hill here, there was just a bridge, like a black and white bridge, and down there was a deep descent there. I don't know if that's where it get the name from. It had like a little bridge around. We could not like walk, how we would walk now, go to the bus stop, you would have to walk around.
Oh yes, the bridge that spanned what was referred to as a gully in the area is partially responsible for the name. There's also the belief that Charles Rowe was related to Margaret Rowe, who owned 80 acres of land in the parish. Speaking about bridge, Elaine Goddard shares an experience of the bridge which she has carried with her for over 65 years.
You know, I was a tomboy, and I remember taking my cousin out to Airy Hill, passing here and trying to hold the bricks, and the bricks pull out, and we landed over the bridge. My knee was swollen up. I had to go to hospital, so I went to the old hospital. I was in there for 2 weeks and never got down to bed until the day I was coming home.
Let us continue with the commercial activities, the buying and selling of goods and other food items in the area.
I could remember there was one shop where we have Chatterton Supermarket. There was the village shop there, little shop, and you know, you would go there, you used to get like flour and sugar and the gray paper, you fold, that kind of thing. Then you used to have the fancy bags and things like now. And that shop belonged to the Jordans. That was years when I was growing up as a child. And after that, They had another shop a little further around. There was always the sandpiper in that area. And then a little ways around there was the Jones's shop.
Opposite Chafet, going toward Lower State. This was one of the shops that had created a crowd, both young, middle-aged, old, everyone. Mr. Jones was friendly and accommodating. He carried everything that one would need. He was open until very late, and anytime you went there, you could get a drink. There were people, lots of activities, dominoes, cards, jokes, just socializing.
So there were two main shops in that area that you could go and, get your things from. And there was also another shop there, Gibson. So those were like our village shops, We didn't used to go to town very often. There wasn't any going into the big supermarkets. We would get what we need from those places around.
Where Chafet is now, as a little girl in the 1940s, there was a gentleman called Mr. Elaine, and he was the pharmacist. He was a pharmacist, and what impressed me most was the beautiful store windows he had, and he had certain parts of that establishment rented out so that they display their goods and whatever they had in these store windows. That impressed me. I remember too that at Christmas there was a meeting going on with Miss Simmons, so they had people from all over that would come down to Charles Rowe Bridge to take advantage of that, so that at Christmas they would receive quite a sum of money to do the necessaries. Now, another point I want to illustrate is that at that time, in 1945-46, the war was just finishing, the Second World War, and Mr. Elaine provided radios. In those days, not everyone had a radio, so they would not have known, except for the newspapers, what is going on. And old men, young men, they were interested in what, and they were huddled around the environment of that establishment so that they would be able to hear what was going on. That was another important aspect
of life in Charles Rowe Bridge at that time. Interestingly enough, Mrs. Goddard's description might have come as a surprise to many of us. As you will see through Marva's description of the same area, remember that Marva came along many years after Elaine Goddard. Does she know of the existence of any building on the same spot? Her idea of what existed there is perhaps the widely held view in Barbados today. The descriptions of the two ladies who lived in the area at different times reinforce the importance of documenting your community's history.
Where Chafet is now, there wasn't any thing there. Most of that was just land, and when the rain, when the rain came, it used to be flooded out down there. You always say the bridge flooded out and things like that.
Continuing with the tour, Mrs. Goddard takes us in an easterly direction from the bridge.
Next to the gas station, going up Thornhill Hill, you will see a bungalow there now. It used to be Caudry Blaffett, and before him, Mr. Neville Blaffett. They too occupied upstairs house with the shop underneath. It seemed to me in that era, that's how the houses were built. And they carried on a thriving business there with a shop. Also, they provide entertainment. And when I said entertainment, I mean it was, in those days, couples. If you were invited to a dance, you would come as a couple. And it was a big orchestra, Percy Green Orchestra. That was my first recollection, Percy Green. And it would be in the evening, around 7:30 to 8 o'clock. The bay windows would be open, and the dancing and the music. And it was absolutely beautiful at that time. Now, keeping on that same vein and going up Thornhill Hill, there was our school. Just where the post office is now, that spanking brand new post office, was St. George Girls' School, where I attended and where my mother attended at that time. And the headmistress was Miss Alma Yearwood. At the back where the police station is and where the resource center was a merchant called H.R.H. Goring. And he did merchandise, sold all types of produce, plus dry goods. He was church warden for quite a number of years.
And further up would have been the boys. The boys' school is still there, next to the parish church.
St. George Boys' School is very important. That was all the church armies. Mommy used to take me to all, you know. And I remember as a girl, this is important too. She had me with her that night. And F.M. Dowden, he was from England. He came down to the church army that night, and he had important information. And he told us that the war was finished. I always remember that. The church bells rang out and everything else. And they started the tamarines, and very, very interesting. And Mommy would always take me with her to these church army meetings.
Youth groups have always been celebrated as associations that build team spirit among members, helping them to develop a greater appreciation of the environment and to become selfless citizens who recognize the importance of looking out for the interests of their neighbors and certainly the less fortunate in their communities. St. George is on record as having such associations in Elaine's early days.
Some of us thought that we needed something in the community to put us a little further on, rather than Latin, French, and that at school. We wanted a community with some kind of activity. So we had opened a club. We decided to form a club. And I was a founder member of that club. And the club was called the Hilltoppers Club. A lot of St. George people will remember that. The Hilltoppers Club. We formed the Hilltoppers Club. It was a netball club. And we used to meet in the school. Now in those days, you weren't just meeting like how children would go now. And the teachers, A.G. Jordan, who was headmaster of St. George, was the patron of our club. Then the teachers, like Miss Niles and Miss Keat and all that, and all those people, would come every Saturday once we were having meetings and be there. They had to be there as our guardians. And we decided to have a concert, which was very well attended. And people were looking for things to do and so on. And of course the support. And with that money, we decided that we would go to St. George's Almshouse. It was the Almshouse in those days. Just where the children's home is now was the Almshouse. And we decided that we would give out cake and drinks and so on. We were happy to do that, both girls and boys, teenagers. But the teachers and Mr. A.G. Jordan decided that we should have some aspect of it too. So they would keep back some of the monies so that we could have. And on All Year's Night, all of us from the club would be dressed, beautifully dressed. And teachers there again, they were always with us. And 1 minute at 12, they would the lights would be turned off, we knew. And whoever young man, the fella likes you, would try to get in your direction so they can get a kiss very quickly. I remember that, we loved that as children.
Now, as we are in the area, let us take into consideration activities that occurred right here on George Park. And for those of you who are not from St. George, George Park is not the name of a man. It is an area where community activities are held, many of a sporting nature.
George Park was a real playing field, very, very, very attached to the St. George youth, and every game would be played there. the games would be played there. And you had people from all over coming to George Park. And the crowds were enthusiastic. It was, I don't even know, you know, just to be dressed up as a cricketer and playing cricket for George Park was something that we look forward to. And it was used for several things. As I told you, we used it as a netball for the Hilltoppers Club. And if the Sunday school or whatever was going on and they needed to use that space, A.G. Jordan would allow them to do it. A.G. Jordan was the headmaster of St. George Boys School, the first headmaster that I ever knew.
The cholera burial ground was mentioned in last week's program by Dr. Henderson Carter, who incidentally is currently preparing a presentation on the cholera outbreak in Barbados. And we, of course, will turn that into a television program just for you. What does Mrs. Goddard know about the cholera burial ground here in St. George? Her response will reinforce the importance of the oral tradition in Barbados.
That's a little before my time, but I was told about it. Mommy told me that it was terrible. There were many people who probably were just unconscious, but because of the severity of the disease, they had to be buried. That was true. So we still have it corned off, and we try to keep it as sacred as we can.
That and more will be revealed when we produce the television series on the cholera outbreak in Barbados. If you are of a certain age, you would know of the original road network in this area, where the old road was much closer to the guard wall of the church, until that point in time when the authorities, in a sense, defied what might be described as colonial roadways.
That road that you see now that is built there on the opposite side of it was closer to St. George. All the buses used to pass right on that area by St. George Church to go up to Ellerton and all that. All right? So really and truly, there has been an improvement and a difference there with the road being cut across now and going in the other direction. Now, in that area, going up was my lesson teacher, Mr. Haynes. Mr. Haynes. They too were very prominent people. They had a big shop there. Myself and the Williams boys and quite a few of us used to go to private lessons with Mr. Haynes. All that has been removed to build that big show fair and all that there now. Now, going up on the left was the house for the priest residence. And it's still there upwards to now. Priest residence. All the priests lived there. Now, going up a little further on, they had a lady called Miss Allen. When the taxes and so on were transferred from Foster Lodge here, they went there to that establishment at Miss Allen House. Big, great house there now. But of course, everything has changed now.
Just in case you are wondering, this is the house at Foster Lodge where the taxes were paid. Marva lived in Foster Lodge. Does she have memories of this?
Well, before you get to Rowan's, there was always Foster Lodge. This is Foster Lodge right here on my right. And they say long ago, in the 40s and 50s, they would go to this great house here to pay the taxes. And that was owned by the Masons at that time.
And in those days, they used to collect all the taxes from all over. Now, people might not know this. I've seen people from all over coming here to pay their taxes and so on. He was the one there for that.
Let us now rejoin the tour on the Rectory Hill and learn about the Odos.
The Odos are one of the older family in St. George. He practiced the choir. The choir master, organist, Mr. Julian Odell. And he was also the chief person for the mail. What would you call that again? Postmaster. So everything was directed from his home. And that was right there, just beyond going up from the priest's home, right there.
We could not engage Marva Greene without learning something about her family business. It is all part of the celebrated history of Charles Rowe Bridge and surrounding areas. Of course, it is something that would inspire Barbados. The connection with today's two guests will be revealed.
Carter's Bakery intrigued me when I saw Marva Greene, because they lived here. I told you we had all this rented out. When I was a girl, the Carters came here with their children, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. That little girl, that is Mrs. Greene now, was about 3 years old. And her sister, Hetty Carter, was about 5. And then there was a boy. He lives in the States. Three little children. And I used to give a little private lessons to the eldest girl, Hetty. And then, of course, as I was an older girl, I went away to study. And then when I came back to be married in 1962, Hetty was my bridesmaid. Very intriguing, yes. And they lived here up until the 1970s. But then my father told them that I was soon to be married, and would be coming back home. So he wouldn't like them to put down too much roots and then have to. So, in fact, when they moved from here, they went over there. And then, of course, moving from there, Foster Lodge was being sold out, so they took Foster Lodge. So we have a very good rapport.
Yes, as I was growing up in like my early teens, my mom, who is Mrs. Vilma Carter, she's now deceased, and my dad, Reginald Carter, both deceased. They all live up in their 90s, so it's only about 3 to 4 years ago that, you know, they're gone now. So we are trying our best to carry on the business. And as growing up, I saw my parents working very hard. My dad used to work at Lower State, and he used to be painting down there for a long time. And like the big tall house I could remember, you know, Mommy used to always be praying that it doesn't go up and fall, because he would go up there and paint all of those, the house and things like that. And as we were growing up, you know, my mom, she always liked to, she said from a child, she used to like to make little mud cakes and, you know, put them in this little thing, and they would pretend that they're serving them to their, you know, siblings and things. She always liked making cakes. So she just started in her kitchen. We were not always on this spot here. We were further down the road where you see they have the pharmacy. We were on top of that hill. But then we moved up to this location here. And my mom, when she was down there on the hill, she started just making sweet bread, and the boys on the bridge would come up on Saturday and Sunday nights and, you know, start buying these little sweet bread and cakes. And she started with just a small amount of flour, like a 25, and then pounds, and then she went to about 50, and then a bag, and, you know, she started like that. She didn't even have a big oven. She would make the bread after time. The demand for the bread came more, so she would make this bread. And my dad, he had an open back red Datsun van, so they would pack all this bread on the van, and we would go to Britain's Hill to a guy named Dennis. He had a big brick oven, and they would bake the bread and bring back the bread, you know, and sell the bread. That's how she started. So as she went along, and, you know, she got her own oven and thing, and it was even out there that she learned how to do like the salt bread and the turnover. And at that time, she didn't know that was, you know, a blessing in disguise. And salt bread now is our biggest seller, because they moved from a bag, and now some days they make 20 bags of, 100-pound bags of flour a day in the bakery. And most of it is usually be salt bread. The people kind of like Carter's salt bread a lot. They always, you know, come and get the bread. And my mother was like a real person who would persevere. She never give up, always trying. And my dad would help her also, you know, as they come along, they work together. And that is how Carter's Bakery really was established in the early days when they would, you know, be there, would just be helping around the place, helping mother, that kind of thing. My sisters as well, brother, I have one brother, and we would all be helping. And that's how we came along because of, well, Mom's vision, because she always had that vision that she would like to, you know, own her own business, and that is what she worked towards.
Good news, the family business continues today. This parish holds a very special place in Marva's heart.
Well, I was always a St. George girl, and I think St. George is one of the best parishes in the island. You know, there was always peaceful. You always had nice neighbors to your right and left, and you know, it was that close-knitted community, the spirit of togetherness you will find in the area. Even now that we developed, we still have that, you know, good fellowship and thing with our neighbors. My mom wasn't a hard lady to get along with, neither did my dad. So we didn't have a problem growing up, you know, among people around us, and it was a peaceful area, that's the truth.
And so may Foster Lodge and Charles Rowe Bridge remain peaceful always. I'm Sherwood McCaskie. Thanks for your time.